Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Mike Sullivan, who is a horror author. And Mike, for readers who are unfamiliar with your type of horror, could you describe what it is that you write?
Sure. I write horror. I'm not sure if it fits under a subgenre of horror. I think I would might just call it, basic horror. I'm not slasher or splatterpunk or anything like that. I just kind of write weird, creepy stories that have strange occurrences in them, and hopefully they're a little scary.
It's scary horror stories.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's what horror is. What would you say your definition of horror is?
Oh, that's a good question. I think horror to me would be a story, whether it's a film or a book or a short or something like a TV show that is using frightening uh, imagery to propel the narrative forward and give us characters that have to deal with, whether it's supernatural or not, horrific scenarios that hopefully expand upon the character and may or may not have a positive impact on them.
Your opinion. What's more important to a horror story, the characters or the plot?
Oh, I think characters are important in any story. I think in horror, the plot is maybe a little bit more important in that type of story than, for example, romantic comedy or a straight dramatic character study. But if you don't have characters in your story, whatever it is that a reader can empathize with and care about, it doesn't matter how many monsters and serial killers you throw at them. The reader, the audience, the reader needs to care. They might not like the characters, but they need to understand and empathize with what the choices the characters are making. So I think the character is always the most important thing.
Okay, so let's get back to your books. Um, what can readers expect from your newest book?
So my latest book is called Dogs, and it is a novella. So it's a short read, and it concerns a man who is coming home to Massachusetts. I live in Massachusetts, so most of my stories are set in Massachusetts. Coming home for his mom's funeral. His mom has passed away, and he's driven his motorcycle up from Pennsylvania straight through to Western Mass, in the hopes that he needs to mourn the loss of his mom, and he's hoping to repair his relationship with his dad, who he's been estranged from for a little while. His parents have moved to a gated community, and so when he gets there, he's driven straight through, so it's late at night, and there's only one way in and out of this neighborhood. And when he gets there, he finds that the dogs in the neighborhood have killed everybody in the entire neighborhood except the children. And he finds a couple of kids, and he proceeds to try to help the kids get out of the neighborhood. But like I said, there's only one way out, and the dogs don't want him to leave.
Interesting plot. So, what do you think draws readers to these kinds of books?
Well, that's a great question. Why would someone want to read something like that? I think readers are looking for uh, ways to feel emotions, whatever they may be, that might not be something that they're either experiencing in their real life or would want to experience in their real life. So when we're coming talking about horror stories and scary stories, no one wants to really have to deal with that kind of frightening behavior, situations that we see in these stories. But when you're reading a story or watching a movie or reading a book, um, you can have that emotional response. Your heartbeat can beat up, can expand, and your brain can start feeling weird, you can be excited and stuff like that, but it's still safe, right? You're still at home or you're in the theater, and you can close the book and put it aside and go, well, I'm not going to deal with that for a little while. I'll come back and that kind of thing. So I think the excitement and the emotional experience from a story like that is the reward you get, and the fact that you're in a safe environment means that you can allow yourself to have those feelings without really risking any physical safety.
So what was the inspiration for dogs?
Well, it's funny. I'll try to say what the inspiration is without spoiling it, because the thing with this story, the last line of the story came to me, and I don't want to say what it is because it'll give it away. But the last line is kind of an homage to a famous last line of um, a Shirley Jackson story. If you're a fan of Shirley Jackson, you might recognize it. And then when I came up with that line, I've never had to write a story this way before. Actually, no, that's not true. I've had to do this once before. I had to like backtrack and say what kind of situation would get me to that line at the end. So the line has the word dogs in it, so I knew it would be something about dogs. So I kind of came up with this scenario, and then I thought, like I was saying a minute ago, I need a good character in here. So I came up with this character who was being coming up, and then it all just kind of um, fell into place. Is a good expression, I guess, to say. What he was doing, who he was, who his parents were, and then the kids in the story, and that kind of thing. And that's kind of how it started and came to be.
That's a very interesting way to create a story.
I wouldn't recommend it. It probably would have been better to kind of work my way towards the end instead of coming up with the last line first.
Oh, I guess some people do come up with the end of a
Yeah,
story before they come up with a story.
yeah, that's
You
the
know,
fun thing. There's so many, every
everybody has their
author,
own way.
yeah, has their own way, and some have, I've talked to so many who have, the way they do it. I'm like, wow, I could never do that, and so it's fun.
I guess so. And so, what kind of research went into writing dogs?
Well, a lot of dogs did not require that much research. A lot of it was just visualizing the neighborhood and the characters. I did do some research on different breeds of dogs. I used to not be a dog person. It's funny, all my friends who have read the book, who knew me back when I was growing up, are shocked that I wrote a book about dogs. And I have since become a little bit of a dog person. My daughter is a huge dog person. She has a whole Instagram, TikTok account with her and her puppy that's fantastic. But so I did do some research because I didn't want to have the people who do know dogs. I wanted to make sure that I was being realistic, and they're not supernatural dogs. They're just, dogs. And I wanted to have all the different types of breeds, as many represented, as well as, rescue dogs, which are mutts and, different types of breeds. So I did some research on that and the behavior of dogs to make sure what I was doing wasn't too outlandish or crazy. So most of the research was about that. The rest of it was all imagination and just picturing this neighborhood where it happened, and like I drew a little sketch so I could describe, they went from this house down to this house and where the gate was and that kind of thing.
Hey, wow. So, what was the biggest challenge that you had in putting out and writing and putting out dogs?
So I think the biggest challenge for me of writing anything is there wasn't one specific challenge to this one that was different to anything else. I think just writing a story that I was happy with is it's just a challenge for me. Finishing something and then redoing it and redoing it and redoing it until it was at a point where I felt like, all right, now I can try to put this out to the world and see if other people like it. It's very hard for me to get to that point. So I haven't. I've had a few short stories published in anthologies. I've had this novella and a previous novella that originally I self-published a number of years ago that then got put into another anthology. But anyway, so that's the most difficult part. There wasn't anything specific to this book that was different from other stories. Just writing a good story with good characters and a good story and sufficient, a satisfying ending, and that kind of thing. And then getting it out to the world was a different experience for me than in the short stories. So I had sent it to a publisher who wanted to publish it, and they sent me a contract, and I had sent the contract to a friend of mine to help me, who's much more experienced in this kind of thing. And he said that this contract was no good. Don't sign it. I suggested some changes that I wanted in the contract, and the publisher said, no, we're not changing it. And they dropped it, the deal. That was it. And I was like, I was disappointed, but it was probably for the best. And then I submitted to another publisher, a tiny little publisher out in Western Massachusetts, and he and I were able to come to an agreement on a contract, and he is the one who ended up publishing the book. So that was my first experience with any kind of publisher, even though it was a tiny little press, getting a cover approved and all of that stuff. So that's how that went.
How different was it when you were self-publishing and getting a regular publisher? I mean, which was harder?
um, Self-publishing is a little more work because you're doing everything yourself. So when I did that, I also had no experience with that kind of thing. That what happened was the a person who ran the Merrimack Valley Halloween Book Festival. That's where you and I met. Chris Golden is a good friend of mine, and uh, he was a teacher of mine. I took a workshop with him, and it's because of him that I'm even talking to you today. He really helped me out with uh, um, finally making it click in my head. I took many writing classes growing up and stuff like that, and it never really clicked until I took a workshop with him and James Moore. And the book I wrote in the workshop, the story it's a novella. It's even a little shorter than a novella. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about word counts and what qualified as a short story versus a novel versus a novella. I just wrote this story, and he was helping me out with that and said the length, because it was an odd length. It was a little too long for many anthologies, but it was too short for many people who would publish a novella. This was a few years ago. Novellas right now are very popular. You see a lot of them now, which is really cool because it's a great length, I think. But anyway,
The
so
length of a novella?
I think it's like 20,000 words, 30,000 words, you know, around there. Um, I don't know how many pages that usually, it depends on how you print it and stuff like that. But so it's like, it's in between a short story and a novel. So you can usually read a novella in one sitting, which is kind of cool. But they have a little bit more in them than a short story. And so Chris told me if I self-published this book, and this was in 20, I can't remember, it was a number of years ago. He would give me a table at the Merrimack Valley Book Festival. And I was like, oh, great. And then I said, how do you self-publish? I don't know. So a friend of mine who was in a writers group I was in at the time, she knows so much about this kind of stuff. She's like, oh, I know how to self-publish. I'll help you. So she helped me out with the layout. You have to design the layout of the pages and the font, and you have to have a certain number of pages because of the way it folds and that kind of thing. I designed the cover myself, and she helped me with all of that, and it was a lot of work. Um, a lot more work than just handing in a manuscript to a publisher and letting them them do all that. But it was pretty cool in the end. This is it here. Called The Bugs Come Out at Night, and you can see it's very thin. um, and so that was the experience with self-publishing. So self-publishing is a lot of authors I know are doing it now. It used to be kind of like ew, self-publishing, but it's not really. It doesn't have that same connotation that it used to. And there's a lot of really, really good authors out there that are self-publishing their books. Um, and the fact that something's self-published doesn't immediately mean that it's no good.
Some authors that started out self-publishing are now very well known.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great, I mean, getting your work out there especially at the beginning of your journey is, it's difficult to do. So why not just do it yourself and get people to read it. And then, like you say, people will read it and realize how good it is. And that could, lead to something bigger, bigger, bigger.
Okay. So what character in Dogs did you love or hate the most?
um, I really dug the father in the book. I mean, I liked my main character, and the reason I liked the dad is because the dad had this kind of um, grumpy old man mentality a little bit, and he was a character that just says what he thinks, and he doesn't, if he's angry, you can tell he's angry. He doesn't pretend, that kind of thing. So he was fun to write. The relationship between him and the son, um, and most of it is in flashbacks, because when the main character gets to his parents' house, his dad has already been attacked. Um, so he was a fun character to write. The way he spoke, his cadence, describing his physicality and the way he interacted with his son, I dug him, and so he was the my favorite character to write. But the main character, I tried to make him heroic. So he is overcoming how he when his he's trying to be brave when earlier in his life he was not brave, and he's realized that I have to step up because these young kids, they need my help and there's no one else to help them. So he's trying to be the person who can take charge and help in this stressful situation where that wasn't a part of his personality before. So that was fun to write too, but I think I like the dad.
So when you're writing the characters, is do you base them on people that you know, or do they completely are they completely made up?
It's a little combination of both. No character I've written is specifically based on one person in my life, but I have taken little pieces of personalities of people I know and combined them and put them together in a character, and then added stuff from my imagination. Um, it's funny you say that though, because the Bugs story, the first one I just mentioned, it has a family in it, a mom, a dad, and two daughters, a teenager and a younger daughter. And the mom character is not very likable. And every time I talk about it to people and stuff, my wife is always very clear to make wants me to make sure it's clear that that's not based on her. She's convinced that people think that. And I'm like, no one thinks that, and that's so. I should say that it's not the mom character in The Bikes Come Out at Night is not based on my wife or anybody I know. That particular character is pure invention. But I think to make them real, you have to give them real, realistic behaviors and realistic personalities and realistic, ways of acting within the story. And I think you can't help but think about people that are in your life that may or may not, that may have certain qualities that then you can put into this character and say, oh, I wonder how Uncle Joe would handle this. Maybe I'll put that in and that kind of thing. So it's like a combination of all that.
Good point. Very good point. So are you a pantser or an outliner?
I think I'm a combo. I've thought about this quite a bit. It's funny you ask because I asked the same thing to my writer friends and the people that I look up to and ask for advice. And I think I'm a plotter first. Like I said earlier, I came up with that last line, and then I kind of came up with beats and things like that. But I don't write down you know, outline in the old-fashioned sense of, part one, chapter one, this happens, chapter two, this happens. But I do have maybe a better term would be like a beat sheet that they use in Hollywood, where I know I want to hit these certain areas before I get to the end, and then I kind of start writing and see if I can get there. But you know, it's not none of that stuff is written in stone. Once you start putting stuff down, the characters, they start talking in your head. You feel like a crazy person, and they start saying things that you didn't expect them to say, and they might go boop over here, and then you're like, oh, that outline or idea is out the window now. We're going down this road, and that's exciting when that happens. So I think I start off as kind of a semi outliner and turn into a pantser.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, now what else can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, I have a couple of short stories out in the world waiting to hear back to see if they will be accepted or not. Like every writer, your list of rejections is very, very long. The funny thing is, I do some nonfiction. Um, on my day job is I work as a video editor for documentaries and that kind of thing. I've been doing that for 30 years. And I just actually got signed a contract for my first nonfiction book length project, which is going to be a behind the scenes book on the movie The Untouchables from 1987, directed by Brian De Palma. So right now that's my main focus because I actually have a contract and I'm gonna that should and it's gonna be a big project. But I'm always working on fiction ideas too at the same time, so it's kind of a lot of a lot of stuff going on, and so the nonfiction's at the top of the pile right now as far as writing. But when I get other ideas and stuff that I can't, you know, the way I've found that these ideas end up being written are the ones that they don't leave, right? I might have an idea or something, and then if I forget it, it probably wasn't that good. But if it keeps coming back, then it probably is something I should work on and try to write down.
Right away, huh?
I'm sorry.
You don't write them down right away.
Yeah, sometimes I do. I'll write down. I have scraps of paper all over the place. That's another thing that drives my wife nuts. She's like, I got post-it notes, but sometimes I'll look at it later and go, I don't know what that means at all. What was that? But it's the ones that really stick in my head that are the ones I find that are the real ones that demand to be written as a story because they keep, they won't stop, won't stop coming back and going, hey, write me.
That happens a lot of times. People have like 10 ideas for stories, and you don't know which one to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a problem. There's only so many hours in the day, and yeah.
All right, now I have questions about being a writer. What
Okay.
is your favorite part about being a writer on the whole publishing and writing and publishing process?
I enjoy the creative aspect of it, and that includes nonfiction. I just like crafting a story out of words. So having a beginning and a middle and an end and creating something that afterwards you can read and go, oh yeah, look at that. That flows. That's a story. That something happens to a character, and that I think is magical, and that's something that um, is a high that I strive for, look for every time. That's my favorite part, the actual creating something out of just words on a page and reading it back afterwards and going, oh yeah, cool, that's good. That's my favorite part.
You just made me think about something, putting words on a page. What do you think about the whole AI thing
Oh,
about
I hate it. I think it's awful. From a creative point of view, AI is great for tasks, repetitive tasks that that can help us. It's great for research, scientific stuff, and all stuff like that. But when you're talking creative AI for writing or artwork or anything like that, that's theft. That's all that is theft, pure and simple. And the computer is not creating anything. the computer is taking little bits and pieces from all over the web that other people have created and combining it. And those people are not getting any credit. They're not getting paid or anything. And I think it's horrible. I'm so against it. I can't even begin to describe how much I hate it.
Agree. Yeah. What about if you use AI to redo your words?
Never.
I know.
The closest thing I might do, and I always feel a little guilty doing it, is I know I have a weakness with active versus passive sentence structure. That's just something that I struggle with over and over again, and I've worked on it with writers groups and teachers, and I've done my own research on, and it's just one of those things. Everybody has one thing that they struggle with. So I have in the past put a paragraph in that I've written and asked it, is this passive or active? And if it says it's passive, I rewrite it. I never say, all right, make it active, anything like that. I just want to make sure that it identifies when I'm being passive versus active, because especially in horror writing, you don't want to be passive. I mean, sometimes you need to be, sometimes absolutely, but you always want to use active verbs and active writing to, propel your story and stuff like that. And that is something I struggle with. But other than that, no, I don't. I just I hate it.
Well, it's kind of okay to tell you that the grammar is wrong
Yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. If the grant, yeah, let me know, but I will fix it.
Yeah,
I don't want the
exactly.
computer to fix it. I'll fix it.
Yeah. I think a lot of writers feel the same way. They hate
Yeah,
AI doing
it,
anything with writing.
yeah, and it's not your words, right?
Yeah,
Some
exactly.
and it's not even the computer stole those words from somebody else. So I want it to be my words, my sentences, my mistakes, my bad sentences, whatever. I want it all to be me. I don't want it to be and right now the stuff that AI generates too it's not good.
What do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process, and how do you overcome that?
For me, the challenging part is sitting in the chair and doing it and not saying I'll do it later. I'm a really bad procrastinator. I find the best thing to do is to have it like a job, have it scheduled, um, that you do it every day. I mean, most writers I know have a day job that they have, so I've found that I'm more creative early in the morning when I first wake up. So I get up a little bit earlier before I'm going to start my day job and try to write for an hour if I can, even if it's only a half hour, 20 minutes. But to do it at the same time every day, so that way your brain and it's like muscle memory, you're like, all right, it's time to write. I'm going to go into writer's mode, because that for me is the biggest challenge, is actually just doing it. Um, then when you do it, then that fun part kicks in that I was just talking about. So there's a reward system. If I get my butt in the chair and start doing it, I'm going to feel really good about it later on. Probably I might be, not like it so much, but I can fix that. But it's like a carrot and stick scenario. There's a carrot, I get the carrot at the end. So that for me is the most difficult part, just sitting in the chair and doing it.
So, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Adventure. I've just really enjoyed going to events, being on a panel. I did a panel recently, which was one of my first ones, which is super cool, and meeting other authors and other readers that have, like, for someone to come up to me and ask me to sign my book that they've bought and read and said they liked. That's incredibly super cool. And the first time that happened, I was just like, really? You want me to sign your book? That's crazy. Um, so those things, and the horror community of people I've met up here in New England, especially, but even people all over the country, everybody's been super cool and super nice. And I don't know, people have said this before, that the people who write horror are some of the nicest people you ever want to meet. And maybe it's because we're able to murder and kill and get all that weird thoughts out on the page. Everybody I've met has been, if you ask them advice, They always give it, help. They always give it, sometimes if you ask them to read a story, you give me your opinion, they'll do that and, do it nicely, not like say, you stink, you should give this up or something like that. I haven't met anybody who has tried to use any influence to keep other people down. You know what I mean? Like for there to be too selfish and that kind of thing. I mean, there are jerks all over the place, but most of the people I've met in the past few years in the horror community have been awesome. So I would say that has been the biggest adventure, reading all these new people that have been really a benefit to my own experience.
Hey, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
The biggest lesson, it might seem kind of silly, other than write every day, and you hear the same type of writing advice a lot. But the biggest lesson I've learned was from a one of my teachers I mentioned earlier, Jim Moore, who passed away recently. He and Chris Golden were partners in this workshop a number of years ago that I took. I was the only guy to take it twice. And Jim is an awesome writer. You should read. Anybody should look out for his books, horror, and he is one, like we were mentioning offline, horror and fantasy kind of combining. He did some stuff in the fantasy horror line, and then he did straight up horror. But his books are awesome. But what he taught me was, and this might seem a little silly, but I still think of it every time I write, and I teach filmmaking to students, and I tell them the same exact thing. Watch out for word repetition. Don't repeat the same word over and over again in your sentence, in your paragraph. He gave me back a manuscript for the Bugs story when I was first starting out, and he had circled. Uh, it's funny, the word was dog actually, because there's an intro paragraph where a person is walking their dog down a road in the story, and he circled every time I used the word dog in like two paragraphs, and it was like, I was like, holy cow, I didn't even realize I said that. And he goes, yeah, look at the dictionary. There's a dictionary filled with words. Don't repeat your words. And I mean, he was really cool about the way he said it. But I think about that all the time now. Every paragraph I write, I look and I say, oh look, I used that word 3 times. I got to use different words or rewrite a sentence so you don't need that word, right? So, and that is the thing I probably think about the most out of all the advice I've been given and stuff about writing.
That's one I hadn't heard, but boy,
It's
that's
huge.
really
Yeah.
good. Yeah. Do you have any other advice that you'd like to share with other writers?
Um, I feel weird giving advice because I still feel like I'm a newbie. I think that sometimes I think people might quit too early, give up too early. If the first thing you do uh, isn't you don't think it's very good, or someone tells you it's not very good, don't immediately take that to heart. Maybe think about um, what they're saying. Like I tell my students when I teach filmmaking and they're starting out, I'm like, remember when you were riding a bike, you fell over all the time, but now you can ride a bike. If you gave up the first time you fell off the bike, you wouldn't be able to ride a bike. And so keep going, trying, and learning. And the other thing I think about when people give notes, I deal with this quite a bit with the documentaries I edit. When I get back notes from producers and directors, and it's similar to when stories come back with notes. The note might not be the exact problem. I try to understand what they're reacting to in a bigger way. So they might say uh, this character, um, in the end of the story, this character doesn't seem like he or she would do this. So instead of changing what they do at the end of the story, maybe go back and understand why are they reacting to what the character does at the end of the story. What has the character done earlier? And maybe there's not a believable progression to get to that point in the story. So the change might not need to happen at that point. The change might need to happen up here. So don't take their notes to heart and change that, because that might make it worse. You might need to have something happen back here that'll make this can stay now, but it'll be more believable. If that makes any sense. So I would try to look at when someone gives you critiques on your work, try to think about what they're reacting to as opposed to just saying they didn't like this part of the story, that kind of thing.
It's good. So are there any groups, clubs, or organizations that might have helped you in your career that you recommend to other writers?
Two, I can think of two right off the bat. So the first thing is there's lots of writers conventions, writing conventions, horror conventions. There's a lot of really good ones. The one that I've been going to the past couple of years, past few years, that is incredible is called Necon, Necon. Are you familiar with it? Yeah, yeah. Camp. They call it Camp Necon, and if you go, I think that's the website, campnecon.com. They have it every summer in July, I think, and they've moved to a new location in New Hampshire, which last year was the first year there. I think it's St. Anselm's College. I can't remember, but they have like they'll have a guest of honor and a Nikon legend, and like they'll invite like legit people. The first year I went in person, it was Joe Lansdale, um, and it's been going on for years. But everybody who goes there is once again super cool, very laid back. Everybody has fun. There are panels and meetings and stuff like that, but it's more just a place to hang out with writers and readers of horror and not feel like you don't belong. Everybody is welcome warmly. The guests of honors that are there, who are like quote unquote big time famous authors like Joe Lansdale. He was like the nicest guy you'd ever want to meet, and so everybody just hangs out. It's 3 days over a weekend, so you eat meals together and hang out at night together and talk about books and writing and anything else, and that has been super beneficial to me. And then a little smaller group is the New England Horror Writers group. That they are, you can become a member. They have a Facebook page. Um, they also put out an anthology every year, and it has Wicked something. This last one is Wicked Abandoned. They've had Wicked Witches, Wicked Sick. It's always Wicked something because of the Massachusetts lingo, Wicked. But there's everybody in that group is super nice and fun to hang out with and talk books. So those are the two groups that I recommend.
Hey, great. Now I have questions about you as a person. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I like to cook. That might be something. I like to cook. I do all the cooking at home as far as dinners. My wife is the baker. She does the desserts. I cook the dinners, and I do enjoy cooking a lot. But I'm not one of these people that can look in my cupboard and say, "Oh, I'm just going to make something with all this stuff." I need a recipe. I need a recipe, and then I go to the store and I buy the ingredients. And then if it says a quarter cup of this, I'm measuring a quarter cup and scraping the top and doing that. That's how I do it. So that might be it. I like to cook.
Recipe to cook.
Oh, I don't have a favorite. I've tried a lot of different things. I don't have like a go-to, right? Like I guess a lot of people do. Like, oh, my specialty this. I don't really have one of those. I've tried. There's some things I go back to, here and there. But I tend to flip through cookbooks that I have around the house. Sometimes I'll buy new cookbooks and see. I'm usually drawn. I'm kind of a picky eater too. I'm not the most I used to be a lot worse. I'm better now. So I usually look at the picture. If the picture looks appetizing, I'm like, oh, and then I'll look and see how, is that a lot of work? Listen, I don't want to get carried away here. So, yeah, I don't have a specialty.
So, what is or are your passions when you're not writing, and how do you make time for the hobbies that you love?
My main thing other than writing that I do, I'm a huge movie guy. I've been a movie fanatic all my life. My dad got me into movies when I was a little kid, and that's why I do what I do. I studied film in college, and I've been lucky enough to work as a video editor for over 30 years, working on documentaries and media and things that you find in museum. I don't do anything for broadcast. All the stuff I've done you can see in museums and visitor centers across the country. Um, so movies are my jam outside of writing and reading. I've watched old movies, new movies, whatever, anything. I try to really watch as many movies as I can, and uh, when you know it's hard to fit in, go, and then COVID got in the way, going to the movies and everything. So I watch movies at home. I still like to go to the theater. I hate the fact that now theaters are kind of not where people go. I'm not a big fan of streaming movies, original movies. I'd rather everybody go to the theater and see it on the big screen, surrounded by strangers. That's the real way you're supposed to see a movie. So I have in the other room, like these books behind me are my fiction books. In my movie room, which is across the hall, are all my movie books, and I have even a bigger shelf probably of, and that's what led me to my nonfiction project for The Untouchables, because I'm a huge Brian De Palma fan, and I love the movie The Untouchables, and I just decided I want to write a book about it. And, so other than reading um, fiction, I watch movies.
Okay. So what does your writing space look like? And I guess we can see it.
This is it. Yeah.
I guess we can see
Um,
it there.
Kind of cramped. I
Mhm.
usually write, like right now I'm talking to you on my desktop computer, which is my editing computer for when I edit the videos. I usually do all my writing here on the laptop. I like the laptop because sometimes I need to get out of this room. It's not very big. It's cluttered. It's messy, and so sometimes um, I take the laptop and I'll either go out in the kitchen or even outside of the house somewhere. So I like having that, but um, this is it. This is the writing space. Where it
What do
all-
you need to have with you when you're writing or editing? Like things like food, drink.
Usually because I try to do it in the morning, I drink coffee. I'm not one of these people that drinks coffee all day long. I usually have two, maybe 3 cups of coffee in the morning. So I have that because I find that gives you a little bit of a jolt, gets the engine revving. But I don't write with music. I've tried that. I know that if I wrote with music with lyrics, I couldn't focus on writing words if I was hearing words. So sometimes I put musical. I'm a big, like I said, I'm a movie guy, so I love movie soundtracks. I've experimented with that, but I think that also kind of gets in the way. Like I'll start listening to the music and get like, so I'm not focused. Um, so it's usually, just silence or, room noise, that kind of thing. But other than that, I don't have any rituals or um, superstitions about it or anything like that.
Critters very often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them through their work. And do you have any? And if you do, what are they? And do they help or hinder you?
We are a household of pets. I mentioned my daughter, she's, grown and has her own place now, but, all growing up, we were mainly a cat household. We've had anywhere from between 2 to 4 cats at any given time. And all growing up, we had cats in my house. So currently, right now, we have 3 cats. I have the door shut. Otherwise, one of them would probably be walking around and you'd see him, all over the place. And I also have a dog, a mutt rescue dog that she is about, how old is she? 10 years old, 7 years old. I can't remember. We've had a number of dogs because my daughter, like I said, she loves dogs. She loves cats. She's just an animal person of all kinds. And the dog we have now, she's a really good dog. She's very sweet, but she's what's called a reactive dog, which I hadn't heard of. My daughter educated me about that term. So if someone comes over to the house, we live on a cul-de-sac. So if anyone walks by here or even through the cul-de-sac, the dog starts, barking. And she doesn't mean anything by it. She's completely harmless, but she doesn't like other people. So she doesn't usually come in here either. She'll come in here if the vacuum's going. She'll come in here and sit at my feet. So we have pets and stuff, and sometimes they get in the way. But it's fun.
I just have two more questions for you, actually three more questions.
Okay.
You mentioned that most of your, or all of your books are based in New England.
hmm All
Um,
but one. All my stories except
all your
actually that's
stories.
not true. Two. I have two stories that are outside of New England. Now that I think about it.
So, how important has New England been to your books? I mean,
Um,
how do you use New England in your books?
I think I use it because this is where I grew up. I grew up in New England. The house I'm living in was my dad's house. I bought off of him. My parents were divorced, so this is like the every other weekend house in the '70s that a lot of us children of divorce did. So I just think I know it. It's a little bit of a, I don't want to say crutch, but it's a bit of a um, comfort to be able to describe an area and the people that live in that area. And then if I do have to do research, I can make the research on things that I don't know about. So I feel like writing about New England and about the people in New England and the attitudes of people in New England is just something I know through 50 some odd years of growing up and meeting people and talking to people. And I understand the weather and the change of seasons. And plus, I think New England is just super cool for horror. I mean, we got Stephen King up in Maine, and there's so many horror writers that in New England. Salem, Massachusetts is such a important part of horror, and especially in October. My birthday is Halloween, so it must have been fate. But I just think I love New England. I love the change of seasons. I think I would get bored if I lived somewhere that was the same weather all the time. Although, as I'm getting older, I'm not as big a fan of winter and snow. But around Christmas time, it's nice. So I think my comfort level about New England is why I've set so many stories here because it's a little less heavy lifting.
Okay. So, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And you can you
Well,
can get Mike's book at Annie's if you call us at 508-796-5613, or you can email us at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. So, where else can people find your books?
Well, I know that there's a few signed copies of dogs at Aesop's Fable in Holliston, which is a great independent bookstore. I'm a huge fan of independent bookstores. They're awesome. I go to so many author events at independent bookstores around Massachusetts. There's a great one, Unlikely Story, in uh, Norton. No, not Norton. I can't remember where it is. And there's another great one that I'm drawing a blank up north. But you can also go to the Amazon and find my books on Amazon.
And how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
I am on um, the social medias. I'm not the biggest social media um, person. I go on social media. I used to be a big fan of Twitter until recent events. But I'm on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. The handle is at Mike Sull Media. MikeSullMedia. And I'm also on Blue Sky, which is really cool. The same handle. Instagram, also the same thing, Mike Sull Media. And then I have a website, which is my editing and writing kind of combined. It's www.sullivanedit.com. So that's usually where I can be found. And I have an email address on the website. Uh, Anyone wanted to email me. Mhm.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Mike. Mike Sullivan, and maybe we will see you at the store sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I get out to Worcester.
Thanks very much.